Hello, everyone. So this is part 2 of scientific writing, and this is actually part 1 of part 2. That's kind of a confusing thing. So last week was week number 5, and we were discussing scientific writing tips, and that was part 1. This week we are doing part 2, and this is part 1 of part 2. Make sense? Who knows? Who cares? All right, so in this lecture and in the next one, we're going to be exploring some different tips, things to do or not to do when writing your paper. And I'll say it again, if I haven't said it before, scientific writing is challenging. It takes time, it takes practice. It's not what we're used to writing, it's not how we are used to writing, I should say. So let's explore things here. And looking at academic writing versus colloquial writing. So colloquial refers to a style of writing that is conversational in nature. Academic avoids conversational language. It embraces a professional, analytical tone instead. The goal is to use precise language, avoid language which you may be unfamiliar with. You want to prioritize clarity, avoid filler words, and avoid using contractions. So we're going to take a look at some examples here, and then in the next lecture, we'll have some other information that I had found online and kind of did a nice job of summarizing things. The whole goal is to not read an entire book on scientific writing, but to learn by doing and to think about some of the most common mistakes that people make. So, colloquial versus academic. I thought the writer did a great job in the book because it talks so much about her life as an actress. So avoid empty phrases. Did a great job. Well, within a scientific paper, what does great mean? How do we quantify that? Academic writing, the writer skillfully narrates her experiences as an actress through the use of witty language and non-linear storytelling. Now, a word like skillfully may even be problematic within a scientific paper. What does skillfully mean? Avoid impolite assessments or hasty generalizations. So, for example, but frankly, I cannot believe she got to meet all the people she said she did. She must be making the whole book up. A way to make that nice, because she does not provide many details about the famous people she met, the reliability of her stories is questionable. Avoid conversational expressions, things like frankly, got, making the whole book up, and contractions like can't and don't. And then we see the examples there. Avoid language you can't define. That's very important. How do you quantify something? Avoid offensive language because it demonstrates a lack of respect or understanding for your subject matter. Instead, be very specific about the people or thing that you're discussing. And so what can be potential offensive language in a research paper or within a scope and review or systematic review paper usually comes about when you're looking at the limitations of the studies involved. And so can you identify a limitation without making it critical of the authors of the paper? Here's some examples from last year, things that I looked at from ARP1 from last year's group. And we'll see this again in the next lecture. Spell out numbers at the start of a sentence. Numbers below 10 should be spelled out. Avoid using the word above. We think about things when we're writing on a Word document that something that came before is above, but it's not above. It's aforementioned. Avoid using the same word twice in a sentence. That can be tricky sometimes. Avoid unnecessary phrases. So example, the article by Racine et al. Discussed the findings. Both the article by and discuss the findings should be revised. So Racine et al. Found the administration of a single dose of the drug was effective at reducing symptoms in a population of. So we're trying to be specific. Doesn't need to be the article by Racine, just Racine et al. And don't need to talk about discussing their findings, just go ahead and do it. Avoid unnecessary words. It was thus concluded. Just make it was concluded. Capitalization of medical diagnoses. Usually no. In general, do not capitalize the names of diseases, treatments, theories, or concepts, but if in doubt, Google it. Capitalize. Use an initial capital letter for medical terms only if the term is a proper noun or adjective, or if it is a part of that genus. Otherwise, don't use initial capitals for the names of diseases and viruses, diagnostic procedures, syndromes, or anatomical parts. So there's some examples there. Abbreviations. Spell out first, then use that abbreviation throughout. Try to avoid abbreviations that are not common. What does the word mean? For example, in parentheses there is a diagnosis. You can put in any diagnosis there. Diagnosis is something that up to 15% of people experience and can. So what does something mean? That is that kind of conversational writing. Instead, this diagnosis is experienced by 15% of. Or here's another way to revise things. Healthy People 2030 places a particular focus on an initiative for early, and instead, Healthy People 2030 has listed an objective to increase early screening. Here's some other examples of conversational forms of writing. These things should be avoided. All right, this was a very short one. The next one is around 18 or so minutes.